My name is Craig Wade, and I'm Associate Advisor for Curriculum at Central South Consortium. In this video, I'm going to be talking you through an approach to developing a high-level curriculum in international languages and the processes within the design thinking model that were gone through to develop this curriculum. Design thinking is an internationally accepted model which, when applied to curriculum design, will help you consider the steps in the process of designing a school-level curriculum. The first stage of the design thinking model involves schools taking time to reflect and understand the specific needs of their learners, their staff, and the communities that they work with, which comes from a deep understanding of each school's context. This is called the empathise stage. At this stage, when thinking about designing a discipline or area curriculum, you will be thinking about what this information and understanding means for the way in which you design your curriculum. For example, in international languages, your school's context may mean that the home language for many of your learners is not English. This may lead you to decide that your curriculum needs to incorporate and celebrate the different home languages spoken by the school community as a way of fostering a sense of belonging for all learners and highlighting the rich cultural and linguistic tapestry of your school and wider community. This would help to develop your learners' understanding that languages connect us. You may also know, from your understanding of the background of your learners, that they would have had limited experiences of travelling abroad, or indeed, you may know that many families in your community will find it difficult to finance trips abroad to experience the international language being spoken in the country or countries of study. This may lead to you deciding that in your curriculum, you want to look at providing opportunities for learners to experience what life is like in these countries using other methods, such as virtual tours, experiences of meeting native speakers from the countries of study, or providing food tasting sessions. As part of this empathise stage, you may also be reaffirming some of the learner needs that you already understand as being important. For example, the need for learners to have good language skills that can help them in all areas of study and life and have the possibility to lead to exciting and rewarding careers. It's also important at this stage to consider what it is that learners currently learn and experience through this study of international languages in your school. What works well for the learners, and what are the areas that form part of your current curriculum that you think do not meet the needs of the learners and will need addressing and developing in your curriculum design. Learner focus groups can be a really useful way for you to capture some of this information. You will also be identifying things that are not part of your current curriculum that you need to include. For example, experiences of a second or third international language. This last point has obvious implications as you start to reflect on the knowledge, skills, experiences, or developmental needs of staff in your area. These all affect your curriculum design and offer, particularly in the short term. You may have identified that you want to offer additional international languages at school, but the current expertise within the department means that this would not be possible without additional professional learning and staff development. You may also identify that you want to work in partnership with your cluster as a way of developing and supporting the teaching of international languages in your feeder primary schools. To do this, you will have to think about what it is the staff in your department and in each primary school would need to ensure that this was possible and able to form part of your curriculum. Finally, engaging with and considering the needs of your wider community, for example with parents and carers, will help you to identify experiences, aspirations and ideas that could form part of your curriculum design. For example, you may think about conducting parent and carer surveys to understand their perspectives on international languages, which may lead you to thinking about how your curriculum could help meet or change the views around international languages in the wider community. You may also identify opportunities from individuals or organisations within the wider community who could contribute to your curriculum. It's only by having a full understanding and appraisal of our current situation that we can then move on to the next phase in curriculum design thinking, the define stage. The process or procedural driven Curriculum for Wales framework, with its focus on the 4 purposes, differs massively from what we are used to in terms of our national curriculum. This is why continuing engagement with both the conceptual model of Curriculum for Wales as a whole and the LLC framework is crucial so that you have a deep understanding of the structure and key principles within them. Without a robust understanding of Curriculum for Wales, you risk designing and planning a curriculum that does not meet all of the requirements or of Curriculum for Wales or the Languages Literacy and Communication Framework. This does take time and may mean that you revisit the framework again and again, but this deep understanding of the model, including the 4 purposes, what matters statements for LLC, principles of progression, and descriptions of learning for international languages, will help you to make sense of the Curriculum for Wales model, and when put together with the information you had gathered from the empathise stage of design thinking, will allow you to define or refine your vision for international languages at your school. This process forms an important part of the define stage of design thinking. Establishing a vision or mission statement is so important in curriculum design, as it allows you to articulate what you are setting out to achieve as a department and what your curriculum priorities will be. You are also setting out the goals and aspirations of learners within your school in terms of their study of international languages, and are defining the transformation that will take place in them as a result of their learning and experiences of the international languages curriculum as a whole. Importantly, your vision must have in mind how your curriculum is going to support learners to develop towards the 4 purposes. For your vision to be effective, it needs to be informed by your school's overall vision, and as mentioned, should have the 4 purposes in mind, as these are the aspirations for all learners in Wales. It should also be informed by and co-constructed with all stakeholders, including learners, practitioners within the department, and the wider school community, such as parents, carers, and governors. This means that your vision has the input and insight from a wide range of perspectives and gives everyone ownership and a stake in the success of it. In the vision for learning from the IL example, you can see that the vision has clearly been influenced by the 4 purposes and also the what matters statements from the LLC framework, and state clearly the aspirations and goals for learners. Following the vision for learning, in this example, information on curriculum arrangements for international languages has been included. This section provides details of staffing and expertise within the department, and details of other members of staff from across the school community who contribute to the international languages curriculum through their knowledge, skills, and experiences of international languages. This section also gives details of the curriculum contact time allocated to the teaching of international languages, as this will obviously impact on curriculum design and planning. Finally, this section also outlines elements of the hidden curriculum within international languages, such as trips, clubs, and events, as they are now all considered as the curriculum based on the Curriculum for Wales definition of curriculum as being everything a learner experiences in pursuit of the 4 purposes. What then follows in the curriculum document is essential sense-making of the Curriculum for Wales framework, with a focus on the specific implications and considerations when designing the international languages curriculum. For example, the international languages example mentions clearly how the study of the international languages curriculum will help learners to embody the 4 purposes. This is the first section after the department's vision, as we always need to have the 4 purposes in mind during the design and planning process. As you can see, this information has been taken directly from the LLC curriculum guidance, but has been written with specific consideration for the international language of study. The example also goes on to look at the what matters statements in LLC, which are the key concepts that you must use to design the content of your curriculum. The example has captured the whole of the statements of what matters, as simply using the headlines would risk missing out a lot of the detail for each statement. The importance of using the statements as a whole is highlighted in the curriculum guidance. The example also goes on to think about the mandatory cross-curricular skills of literacy, numeracy, and digital competency that form part of the framework, and give specific examples about how learners will develop these skills through their learning and experiences of international languages. The same is done for integral skills and the cross-cutting themes. It's important to say that all of this information can be found in the LLC guidance. It has just been written and interpreted in a way that is specific to international languages, which is why it is so important for you to take the time to engage with and make sense of the framework. In the third stage of design thinking, the ideate stage, you can start to generate ideas about your high-level curriculum and begin to ask yourself the questions of what you're going to teach, how you are going to teach it, and what and how you teach things will allow your learners to realise the four purposes and progress in their learning. These ideas need to build upon the vision that you have established in the defined stage of the design thinking process. Crucially though, before you can begin to generate any ideas, it is so important that you spend time as a group of professionals within the department or across schools and phases, really understanding how learners should progress in international languages, rather than starting with a theme and then fitting the descriptions of learning to it. This will involve discussions around what the principles of progression mean within international languages and unpicking and discussing the descriptions of learning for each what matters statement. In designing and planning your international languages curriculum, you are making decisions about what knowledge, skills, and experiences learners should develop in international languages that will allow them to progress in each what matters statement. Importantly, you are also deciding in what order you should teach these so that learning and teaching activities are sequenced in a way that supports learners to build upon previous knowledge, skills and experience over time in a learning continuum. Without this crucial consideration of progression within the process of designing your curriculum, you risk designing a curriculum that isn't coherent and does not sequence learning in a way that is appropriately supportive yet suitably challenging for all learners. To support us in understanding how learners should progress in international languages, the LLC guidance gives us useful advice about how to approach progression. The principles of progression for LLC set out broader principles of what progression means in this area and suggest that progression in LLC should be based on an approach of learner progression along a language learning continuum. In the IL example, to understand these principles, each one has been split into key statements or ideas, which then has a further explanation of how this applies to learning, teaching, and experiences in international languages. For example, for the principle of progression increasing breadth and depth of knowledge, this international language curriculum example has identified that for learners to progress in this principle, they will need to have learning and experiences in progressively more challenging contexts, will need to develop increasing sophistication in their understanding of linguistic concepts to support communication, and would also need to develop breadth and depth in their conceptual knowledge in international languages by experiencing a range of different ideas and viewpoints in the target language. These have been explained further in how they relate specifically to the study of French. Although challenging, taking the time to understand and discuss with colleagues each principle of progression will help clarify how the design of your curriculum should ensure that all learners progress in greater sophistication and depth in international languages. As well as the broader principles of progression for each statement of what matters, there are descriptions of learning, which will further help to inform your planning for progression. Descriptions of learning are designed to help us understand what learning looks like over time at 5 progression points, roughly equating to ages 5, 8, 11, 14 and 16. Although for international languages, descriptions of learning mainly begin at progression step 3. Descriptions of learning are reference points that help us to plan knowledge, skills and experiences and inform us about how best to design learning and teaching to support learners to progress within each what matters statement. Descriptions of learning also allow us to ensure that the knowledge, skills and experiences that we have planned within our curriculum are appropriately and suitably challenging enough for learners. Importantly, descriptions of learning are not designed to be used as standalone tasks or activities and should not be used as assessment criteria that you assign to a task or topic that you then use as a tick list of things learners will be able to do. You will assess learners using a range of different approaches against the specific knowledge, skills, and experiences you plan for in your curriculum. I think it's important to remember, though, that the descriptions for learning don't give us all of the answers around how to sequence learning, and they may be things that we need to fill in based on our own professional understanding of how learners may progress from one progression step to the next. For example, for the what matters statement expressing ourselves through language is key to communication, the first description of learning for progression step 2 states that I have experienced opportunities to use international languages. And then in progression step 3 states I can communicate using familiar phrases and sentences. Neither description of learning gives us any detail or specific information about the skills, knowledge, and experiences that learners will need to have had before they can get to each point. So therefore, it is up to us as professionals to make those decisions. We know that the extent to which your learners will have experienced opportunities to learn to use international languages will depend massively on your school's context, and that there are a number of key processes in language learning that need to have taken place before learners would be able to communicate using familiar phrases and sentences. For example, let's take the example of French. Learners would need to first have had experiences in hearing or seeing French written down. They would then need to go on to learn about the alphabet and individual sounds in French. This would then go on to learning about the sounds of strings of letters and phonics, or having knowledge of pronunciation rules, applying these rules to words in French, building up to using them to talk in sentences, and so on and so on. All of these are important processes and stages in learning that you will need to have planned for in your curriculum before learners will be able to demonstrate that they can communicate using familiar phrases and sentences. But when you have an understanding that this needs to take place, you understand the importance of sequencing learning for learner progression in your curriculum. In this example, the information from the descriptions of learning for each what matters statement have been used to sequence knowledge, skills, and experiences into a language learning and experiences continuum. This continuum aims to set out the building blocks for progression within the international language, from learners having little or no knowledge, skills, or experiences in international languages, to realising the descriptions of learning as set out in progression step 5. This continuum has also identified from the descriptions of learning strands of progression within each what matters statement. For example, in Languages Connect Us, the strands of progression that have been identified are language, identity, and culture are linked. Languages are different and the same. And finally, in translanguaging. Similarly, in understanding language is key to understanding the world around us, strands of progression have been identified for understanding meaning, recognizing other people's opinions and perspectives, vocabulary building, and understanding how languages work. Within each of these strands of progression, a continuum of knowledge, skills, and experiences has been created that provide the incremental building blocks or steps that allow learners to progress. So, having sequenced the continuum of knowledge, skills, and experiences in your curriculum, you will then move into the prototype stage of design thinking, where you can successfully start to plan learning and teaching activities that will allow learners to progress along this continuum. Essentially, you're moving from the why and what of your curriculum to the how, or you may think of it as moving from your high-level curriculum to your schemes of learning and experience that give the medium and short-term planning details of learning and teaching. Initially, you may want to start with planning a small unit of learning, for example, over a half term. So as part of the next stage of design thinking, the test stage, you can review its impact as you evaluate and refine your approach. As part of the prototype stage, assessment, an intrinsic part of learning and teaching and day-to-day classroom practice, will be an important consideration. You will have to think carefully about the assessment approaches you will use in your curriculum that will allow you to decide if learners are making progress in their acquisition of knowledge, skills, and experiences as they move along the learning continuum. You will equally need to think about the formative and summative approaches you will use within your curriculum that will identify whether a learner needs to consolidate their learning or whether they are ready to progress to the next step. Each learner is unique and will progress at different rates along the continuum. Importantly though, how you use assessment to help you plan learning and teaching to support all learners to progress will be essential. As learners progress along the continuum, they should also be given more opportunities to be involved in the assessment processes through engagement with self and peer assessment, so this will also have to be planned for. The assessment section from the IL example clearly states the approaches the department will take when assessing learner progress, including guidance on what assessment tools practitioners could use, the departmental approach to giving feedback to learners, that is, celebrating what learners can do, but crucially, ensuring that learners are given clear feedback about their next steps in learning and how they can achieve this, as well as information on how evidence of learner progression will be captured. In the next stage of design thinking, test, you'll be testing your curriculum design to see if it has achieved the goals you set out for it to achieve. The first part of this stage will be trialling your curriculum by delivering it to learners in your school. It's important to remember when trialling that you adapt your approach as necessary and in response to learner feedback, particularly if you feel your approach is not working. You shouldn't plough on with the trialling process regardless if your professional judgment tells you that you need to adapt or change things. Finally, as part of this stage, you will refine your approach based on feedback that you have gathered from learners, practitioners, and, where appropriate, wider stakeholders to help you improve your curriculum. Information from all of these sources will be invaluable in helping you to continue to evaluate and develop your approaches to curriculum design, learning and teaching, learner progression, and assessment. When you have gone through the process of testing your approaches, you are then in a very strong position to be able to adopt, implement, and roll out your international languages curriculum, knowing that you have gone through a robust process of design thinking so that it is true to your vision and meets the needs of the learners, staff, and whole school community. It's important to remember, though, this is not the end of the process of curriculum design and planning. It is a continuous process of refinement that should inform part of your department's and whole school cycle of self-evaluation and improvement planning. At this stage, you will also want to consider investigating, perhaps through an inquiry approach, if there is an implementation gap between what you set out for your vision and curriculum to achieve and what learners actually experience. This will give you a good insight into how effective the learning and teaching strategies within your curriculum are. As a final thought, I think it's important to say that it is critical to think of your international languages curriculum as a living thing that is continuously evolving. You will continue to evaluate and refine it to meet all learners' needs as you strive for higher expectations or as you look for different or more effective ways to support all learners to progress. The process never really ends. I hope that you have found this useful. The curriculum team are really keen to support schools with all stages of the design thinking approach to curriculum. So if you have any questions or if you have examples of how you've used the design thinking model successfully in your school, please get in touch.